Have you ever discovered that your own family made a life-changing decision behind your back? A decision that involved the one place in the world where you thought you still belonged. I never imagined my family would sell my grandmother's house without telling me, but they did. And what they didn't know was that my grandmother had left behind one document that could change everything. My name is Emily Carter, and this is the story of how my family tried to erase me from my grandmother's legacy and how one forgotten document finally exposed the truth. Before we begin, if you enjoy emotional family drama stories about betrayal, secrets, forgiveness, and unexpected twists, please subscribe to the channel. Turn on notifications so you don't miss our next story. Now let me take you back to where everything started. My grandmother, Margaret, lived in a small white house in Ohio. It wasn't a mansion. It wasn't expensive by Hollywood standards. It had an old wooden porch, a tiny garden, creaky stairs, and a kitchen that always smelled like cinnamon and coffee. But to me, it was home. I spent almost every summer there growing up. Grandma Margaret was the one person in my family who never compared me to my older brother, Daniel. My parents always praised Daniel. He was the successful one, the confident one. The son who went to college, got a good job, and eventually bought an expensive house. I was different. I worked ordinary jobs, lived modestly, and spent years taking care of Grandma when her health began to decline. When everyone else became busy, I was the one driving 2 hours every weekend to check on her. I cleaned her kitchen. I took her to doctor's appointments. I fixed her broken television. And when she couldn't sleep, I sat beside her and listened to stories about her childhood. One night, about 6 months before she passed away, Grandma held my hand. "Emily," she whispered, "promise me you'll never let them convince you that you don't belong here." I smiled. "I won't." She looked toward the hallway, then she said something I didn't understand. "There's something in this house that belongs to you." "What is it?" She smiled. "You'll know when the time is right." I assumed she was talking about one of her old jewelry boxes. I never imagined she meant something much bigger. Grandma died peacefully 3 months later. Our family gathered for the funeral. Daniel cried. My mother cried. Even my father, who rarely showed emotion, stood silently beside the grave. Afterward, we returned to Grandma's house. My mother looked around and said, "We'll figure out what to do with the property later." I asked, "What does Grandma's will say?" My father avoided my eyes. "We'll deal with that when the paperwork is finished." That answer bothered me, but I trusted them. That was my mistake. 2 months later, I received a phone call while I was at work. It was my neighbor, Mrs. Wilson. Her voice sounded nervous. "Emily, I thought you knew." "Knew what?" There was a long silence. "Your grandmother's house is being sold." I froze. "What?" "I saw a real estate sign outside yesterday. There were people inside taking measurements." My heart started pounding. "Are you sure?" "I'm positive." I immediately called my mother. She didn't answer. I called my father. Nothing. Then I called Daniel. He finally picked up. "Hey, Emily. Why is Grandma's house being sold?" Silence. Then Daniel sighed. "Mom and Dad were going to tell you." "When?" "We've already accepted an offer." My stomach dropped. "You sold Grandma's house?" "It's just a property, Emily." "No," my voice trembled. "It isn't just a property." Daniel became irritated. "You don't even live there." "I took care of Grandma, and we all loved her." "Then why didn't anyone tell me?" He didn't answer. Finally, he said something that made my blood run cold. "Because we knew you'd make this difficult." I hung up. I drove straight to Grandma's house. But when I arrived, the for sale sign had already been replaced. It said, "Sold." I stood in the driveway, staring at the house where I'd spent my entire childhood. Then I noticed something strange. The front door was slightly open, and taped to the inside was a handwritten note. It was written in Grandma's handwriting, contained only 6 words. "Emily, look beneath the old floor." I stared at those words, and suddenly I remembered Grandma's final promise. "There's something in this house that belongs to you." I knew then that my family hadn't simply sold a house. They had accidentally sold something they didn't even know they were supposed to protect, and I was going to find out what it was. I waited until evening before returning to Grandma's house. I knew the property technically belonged to the new buyer now, so I couldn't simply walk inside. Luckily, Mrs. Wilson had kept a spare key Grandma had given her years ago. She met me outside. "I don't know what's going on," she whispered, "but your grandmother specifically told me that if anything happened to her, I should help you." My heart raced. "You knew," she shook her head. "Not everything." She handed me the key. "Your grandmother told me something strange a few weeks before she died." "What?" Mrs. Wilson looked toward the house. "She said your family would probably try to sell this place." I couldn't believe it. Why would she think that? Because she knew how much your brother wanted it. That made sense. Daniel had always loved expensive things. He had once told Grandma that her house was sitting on valuable land. He even suggested selling it and splitting the money. Grandma refused. She told him, "This house isn't for sale." Apparently, he never accepted that answer. I unlocked the door. Everything looked exactly as I remembered. The old clock, the photographs, the faded curtains, the wooden dining table where Grandma used to serve Thanksgiving dinner. I walked slowly through every room. Then I remembered the note. "Look beneath the old floor." The oldest floor in the house was in Grandma's study. There was a small wooden section near the bookshelf. I moved the rug. One floorboard looked different. I found a screwdriver in the garage and carefully lifted it. Underneath was a small metal box. My hands shook as I pulled it out. The box wasn't locked. Inside were several old photographs, a small gold necklace, and an envelope. The envelope had my name on it, Emily Carter. I opened it. Inside was a letter. "Dear Emily, if you're reading this, something happened that I hoped would never happen. I know your family may tell you that this house belongs to everyone, but they are wrong. Years ago, before your mother was born, I purchased this property with money I inherited from my father. I placed the deed and other legal documents in a safe place because I knew one day people might fight over this house. I want you to have it, not because you took care of me, not because you are my favorite, but because you understand what this house means. It is not about money, it is about family. If they have already sold it, do not panic. The document you need is still here. Look inside the blue book." I immediately searched the bookshelf. There were dozens of books. Finally, I found a faded blue cookbook. Inside it was another envelope, but this one was sealed. Written on the front were the words, "For Emily, to be opened only if the house is sold without her knowledge." I opened it. Inside was a photocopy of an old legal document. At the bottom was Grandma's signature. But there was something even more important. A handwritten paragraph stated that the property had been placed into a family trust, and the trust named me as the beneficiary. My heart stopped. If this document was legitimate, my parents and Daniel had sold a property they didn't legally own, but I needed proof. I took photographs of everything. Then I heard footsteps outside. Someone was coming toward the house. I quickly turned off the lights. A shadow appeared behind the window. Someone tried the front door. I froze. Then I heard Daniel's voice. "Emily?" My heart pounded. He entered. "Emily, I know you're here." I stepped out of the study. Daniel stared at me. Then his eyes moved toward the metal box in my hands. "What did you find?" I said nothing. He walked closer. "Emily, give me the box." "No," his expression changed. "You don't understand what's happening." "I think I understand perfectly." He lowered his voice. "That house has already been sold." I looked directly into his eyes. "Maybe you sold it." I held up Grandma's document. "But I don't think you had the right to." For the first time in my life, Daniel looked genuinely afraid. And that was when I knew Grandma had been preparing for this moment long before she died. The next morning, I took every document to an attorney. His name was Michael Reynolds. He spent nearly 2 hours examining Grandma's paperwork. Finally, he looked at me. "Emily, where did you get this?" "My grandmother left it." He leaned back. "This trust appears legitimate." My heart began beating faster. So the sale could be invalid. I almost cried, not because I wanted the house, but because my family had betrayed me. Michael explained that Grandma had created the trust years earlier. The property was supposed to remain protected for me. My parents had apparently sold the property using documents that did not disclose the trust. The situation could become very serious. Can they go to jail? I asked. That's not something we can assume yet. What should I do? Don't confront them. I nodded. Let me handle the legal side. That afternoon, my mother called. Emily, we need to talk. I know about the house. Silence. Then she said, your father and I made a mistake. A mistake? We didn't know about the trust. Grandma told you? We thought she changed her mind. You never asked me. My mother started crying. Your brother was in financial trouble. I closed my eyes. There it was. The truth. Daniel wasn't simply selling the house because he wanted money. He needed money. How much? My mother hesitated. Daniel owed nearly $180,000. I couldn't believe it. So you sold Grandma's house to pay his debts? We thought we'd divide the money. Between who? She didn't answer. I understood. They planned to give Daniel most of it. But what about me? You have your own life. I laughed bitterly. My own life? I remembered every weekend I had spent taking care of Grandma, every hospital visit, every night she called me because she was scared. My mother whispered, Emily, please don't take this to court. I looked at Grandma's letter sitting on my desk. I didn't start this. Then I hung up. That evening, Daniel came to my apartment. He looked exhausted. I need you to understand something. You sold Grandma's house. I was desperate. You lied to me. I was trying to save my marriage. I stared at him. He explained that his business had collapsed. He had taken loans. His wife didn't know the full amount. He thought selling Grandma's property would solve everything. You could have asked me. You would have said no. I would have helped you. Daniel looked away. Then he said, that's exactly why I couldn't ask you. I didn't understand. What does that mean? He finally looked at me. You always do the right thing. I almost laughed. And that made you afraid to tell me the truth? He nodded, but then something changed. Daniel reached into his jacket and pulled out a folder. I found this in Dad's office. He handed it to me. Inside were copies of the documents used to sell the house. I looked carefully, then I noticed something. One signature didn't match my father's handwriting. Someone had forged it. Who signed this? Daniel shook his head. I don't know. Daniel, this is serious. I know. Then he said something that changed everything. Emily, I think Dad knew about Grandma's trust. I stared at him. What? He once told me Grandma had paperwork protecting the property. My stomach tightened. Then why did he sell it? Daniel didn't answer. Instead, he whispered, because he believed the document was destroyed. The next day, Michael contacted my parents' attorney. The buyer of the property had already paid a large deposit. If the trust was valid, the entire sale could collapse. But there was one problem. We had only a copy of the trust document. We needed the original. Without the original, my family could claim that the document had been replaced or altered. So I returned to Grandma's house. The new buyer hadn't moved in yet. He agreed to let me search for additional documents. I walked through the house one final time. Every room brought back memories. The kitchen where Grandma taught me how to bake. The living room where we watched Christmas movies. The porch where she sat every morning with her coffee. Then I remembered something. Grandma had always told me, when you can't find something, look where people don't think to look. I went into the attic. There were boxes everywhere. Old Christmas decorations, family photographs, furniture. Then I saw an old wooden sewing machine. Grandma never used it anymore. I moved it. Behind it was a small compartment in the wall. Inside was a sealed envelope. My hands trembled. The original trust document was inside, but there was something else. A second letter. This one was addressed to my parents. I opened it. To Robert and Linda, I know you believe Emily doesn't deserve this house because she has less money than Daniel. But I want you to understand something. Money is not proof of worth. Daniel has always believed success means owning more. Emily understands that success means taking care of the people you love. If you sell this house without Emily's permission, you will not only break the law, you will break your daughter's trust. And some things cannot be repaired with money. I cried. My grandmother had known. She knew exactly what my family might do. Then I noticed another page. It contained a handwritten note. If the house is ever sold illegally, give this to Emily. She deserves the truth. Underneath was a list of bank transactions. My parents had received money from Daniel's business months before the sale. They had already been helping him financially. The house wasn't their last resort. It was their biggest opportunity. They had planned the sale. I took everything to Michael. His expression became serious. This changes the situation. What happens now? We can file an emergency claim to stop the transfer. That same evening, my father called. Emily, we need to settle this privately. Why? Because your mother and I don't want this becoming a family scandal. I said quietly, you should have thought about that before selling Grandma's house. He sighed, we'll give you money. How much? $50,000. I almost laughed. You want to buy me off? No. You sold a property worth nearly $500,000 and offered me $50,000? He became angry. You're destroying this family over a house. No, Dad. I paused. You're destroying this family over money. He hung up. 2 days later, the case went before a judge. My parents sat on one side. I sat beside Michael. Daniel sat behind them. The judge examined the trust. Then he asked my father, did you know this document existed? My father looked down. There was a long silence. Finally, he answered, yes. The courtroom became completely silent. My mother began crying. Daniel closed his eyes, and I realized something. The truth was finally out, but I still had no idea what would happen to my family. The judge temporarily stopped the property transfer. The buyer was furious. My parents were terrified, and Daniel looked broken. After the hearing, he approached me. I'm sorry. I didn't respond. He continued. I should have told you. You should have stopped them. I tried. When? He looked down. I tried the night before the sale. I stared at him. Then why didn't you? Because Dad threatened to cut me off. I shook my head. So you let them destroy Grandma's final wishes. I was scared. For the first time, I saw my brother differently. He wasn't the confident man I remembered. He was scared, buried under debt, and ashamed. But that didn't erase what he had done. I can't fix this for you, Daniel. I know, he wiped his eyes, but I'm going to tell the truth. The next hearing was 3 weeks later. Daniel testified. He explained how our father had planned the sale. He admitted that my parents knew about the trust. He admitted that they expected to use most of the money to solve his financial problems. My father's attorney tried to challenge his testimony, but Daniel had emails, text messages, bank records, everything. The evidence was overwhelming. The sale was declared invalid. The property legally remained under the trust, and I became its rightful beneficiary. But then came the part I never expected. The buyer had already spent money renovating the kitchen. He had paid contractors. He had planned to move his family there. I didn't want an innocent person punished because of my family's mistake, so I made a decision. I met him privately. I know you lost money. He nodded. I don't blame you. I explained everything. Then I offered him something. I would reimburse his documented renovation expenses if he agreed to cancel the purchase peacefully. He looked surprised. Why would you do that? Because this house was supposed to represent family. I smiled sadly. I don't want another family destroyed because of it. He accepted. Michael helped arrange the settlement. The house was officially returned to the trust. My parents were forced to repay the money they had taken. Daniel sold his business assets and began paying his debts. And then something unexpected happened. My mother came to see me. She looked older, tired. She sat on my porch, the same porch where Grandma and I used to drink coffee. I was jealous of you, she whispered. I looked at her. What? You had something I never had with my mother. She started crying. Your grandmother loved you without conditions. I didn't say anything. She continued. I thought if Daniel had the house, he would finally feel successful. And what about me? I thought you'd understand. I shook my head. I understood everything. She looked at me. I just didn't understand why my own mother would choose my brother over me. She cried harder. And for the first time, she didn't make excuses. She simply said, "I'm sorry." I wasn't ready to forgive her. Not yet, but I accepted the apology. Sometimes forgiveness doesn't mean forgetting. Sometimes it simply means refusing to carry someone else's mistake for the rest of your life. 6 months later, the house was mine, but I didn't sell it. Instead, I restored it. I repaired the porch, painted the walls, fixed the old kitchen, and kept Grandma's garden exactly the way she had planted it. I also turned one room into a small reading room for local children. Every Saturday, families from the neighborhood could come and read books for free. It became something Grandma would have loved. Daniel eventually found a new job. He and I weren't close like we used to be, but we talked. Slowly, carefully. He paid back every dollar he owed. My father and I remained distant. My mother visited occasionally. She never asked for the house again. One afternoon, almost a year after Grandma's death, I was cleaning the attic. I found one final box. It had my name on it. Inside was a small photograph of Grandma and me. Behind the photograph was another note. I opened it. It said, "Emily, if you've reached this point, then you already know the truth. I never wanted you to fight your family for this house. I wanted you to protect what this house represented. A home should be a place where people feel safe. Not a prize, not an investment, not something to fight over. If your family ever loses its way, remember this. You cannot control what people choose to do. You can only choose who you become because of it. Love them when you can. Forgive them when you're ready. But never allow anyone to make you believe that your kindness is weakness." Love, Grandma. I sat on the attic floor and cried, not because I had won, but because I finally understood. Grandma hadn't left me a house. She had left me a lesson about family, about betrayal, about forgiveness, and about knowing your worth. That evening, I invited my mother and Daniel over. We sat together on the porch. For the first time in years, nobody argued about money. Nobody compared success. Nobody talked about inheritance. We simply talked. Daniel looked at the garden. "Grandma would love this," I smiled. "Yeah," my mother held my hand. "I'm proud of you." Those words once would have meant everything to me. Now they simply felt peaceful. I looked at the old house. The same house my family had tried to sell. The same house that had almost destroyed us. And I realized something. They had forgotten one important document. But the document wasn't the most valuable thing Grandma left behind. The most valuable thing was the truth. Because when money disappears, houses change hands, and people make terrible choices, the truth eventually finds its way home. And sometimes the family you thought you lost can find its way back too. Not exactly the same. Not perfect, but honest, and sometimes that's enough.